Silent Memories. Part 1. The Stranger in the Mirror. It was early morning when Liam woke up, his head throbbing with a dull, unending pain. He lay still, staring at the ceiling, feeling an odd emptiness inside his mind. The room around him was quiet, just the faint hum of the clock ticking on the wall. Everything felt strange, almost as if he didn't belong here. He didn't know why he felt that way, but a small part of him whispered that something was missing. Liam sat up slowly, rubbing his temples, trying to ease the ache in his head. He looked around the room, taking in the plain, simple furniture and the small bed he had just climbed out of. There was a chair in the corner, a dresser against the wall, and a small table with a mirror on it. Nothing felt familiar. When he glanced into the mirror, a strange man stared back at him. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His hair was unkempt, and there was a rough stubble on his face. He blinked, touching his cheek, feeling the roughness of his skin. It was his reflection, yet he felt like he was looking at a stranger. A deep unease began to rise in his chest, and his mind raced with questions. Who am I? Why can't I remember anything? He searched his mind, hoping for a name, a memory, something to tell him who he was, but there was nothing. Just an empty, quiet space. He was still staring at his reflection when he noticed something strange. The man in the mirror looked different from a moment ago. His expression had changed. There was a flicker in his eyes, a hint of fear, or was it guilt? It disappeared so quickly that he almost thought he had imagined it. Shaking off the strange feeling, Liam turned away from the mirror. He walked to the window and looked outside. Tall buildings lined the street, and cars moved steadily below. He didn't recognize the view, didn't know where he was. He felt lost in a city that seemed familiar yet foreign at the same time. A faint sound caught his attention. It was the quiet buzzing of a phone. He turned and saw a cell phone lying on the table by the bed. Picking it up, he glanced at the screen. There was a missed call from a name he didn't recognize. Sarah? The name tugged at something deep inside him, like a forgotten memory just out of reach. He pressed the call button, hoping to hear a voice that might jog his memory. Hello? Came a voice from the other end. It was a woman, her tone filled with worry. Hello? Liam stammered, feeling strangely nervous. This is, Liam? The name slipped out of his mouth naturally, but he wasn't sure if it was really his. Oh, thank God. Liam, the woman exclaimed, relief evident in her voice. Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for days. Liam swallowed, unsure of how to respond. I don't remember, he said honestly, his voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause on the other end, and he could feel her concern growing. You don't remember? What do you mean? I don't know who I am, Liam admitted, feeling a pang of fear as he spoke the words. I don't remember anything. I just woke up in this room, and everything is blank. The woman on the other end was silent for a moment, and then her voice softened. Liam, it's me, Sarah. I'm your partner. We work together. Work? He echoed, feeling a flicker of something. Recognition, perhaps? What do we do? We're detectives. Liam, she replied, her tone calm but worried. We solve cases together. Detective. The word settled over him like a heavy weight. He tried to grasp it, to feel it, but it was like holding on to water. It slipped through his fingers, leaving him with nothing. Listen, Sarah continued, her voice gentle. Maybe you need some rest. You were working on a difficult case, and it might have been too much. But don't worry. I'll help you through this. Just stay where you are. I'll come to get you. Liam nodded, though she couldn't see him. Okay. I'll wait. When the call ended, he sat on the edge of the bed, his mind churning with questions. Detective. He tried to imagine himself in the role, but nothing fit. He felt like he was wearing someone else's clothes. Minutes passed as he sat there in silence, waiting. His eyes drifted to the small table beside the bed, where a notebook lay open. Curiosity tugged at him, and he picked it up, flipping through the pages. The handwriting was messy, scribbled in a hurry. Some words were crossed out, others circled. One line caught his attention. She didn't deserve to die like that. Liam's chest tightened as he read the words. He had no idea what they meant, but something about them felt heavy, dark. His mind filled with flashes of something. A shadowy figure, a dark alley, a scream echoing through the night. His hands began to tremble, and he dropped the notebook. The memories were just fragments, broken pieces of a puzzle he couldn't understand. But one thing was clear. He had been close to something terrible, and now he was supposed to solve it. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Liam's heart jumped, and he stood up, his palms sweaty. He didn't know who would be on the other side. He opened the door to see a woman standing there, a familiar face, though he couldn't remember her name. Her eyes were filled with worry and relief as she looked at him. "Liam," she said softly. "It's me, Sarah." He felt a small sense of comfort, like a lifeline in a storm. She was real, and she seemed to know him, even if he couldn't remember her. "Come on," she said, reaching out to him. "Let's get you home." He followed her, hoping that somehow he could find himself again. But as he left the room, the flickers of memory stayed with him, haunting him like ghosts. The words in the notebook, the shadowy figure, the scream. They were all pieces of a story he had yet to understand. And somewhere deep down, he felt that this story was far from over. Part 2. Shadows of the Past. Liam walked beside Sarah as they left the room, stepping into the quiet hallway. The lights were dim, and the air felt thick with silence. Sarah didn't say much as they moved, but every so often, she would glance at him, concern written on her face. Liam wished he could remember her. She seemed kind, familiar, like someone he should trust. But his mind was a foggy maze, and every step he took only reminded him of how lost he felt. Once they were outside, Sarah led him to a car parked on the street. She opened the door for him, and he slid into the passenger seat. She got in on the driver's side, started the car, and they drove off into the quiet city streets. As they drove, Liam looked out the window, hoping something, anything, would trigger a memory. But the buildings and streets passed by in a blur, and nothing felt familiar. All he had were the strange, broken memories he'd seen earlier. Flashes of a dark alley, a shadowy figure, and the sound of a scream. Liam. Sarah's voice broke the silence, pulling him out of his thoughts. Do you remember anything about the case you were working on? He shook his head. No, nothing. Just small pieces. But they don't make sense. Sarah took a deep breath, glancing over at him. You were investigating a murder. A young woman was found in an alley. It was brutal. You were working day and night on it. It seemed like it was personal for you. Liam felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't remember any of it, but the words made him feel cold inside. A murder? He tried to picture himself solving a case, but all he saw was darkness. Do you think I might have seen something that made me forget? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah looked thoughtful, keeping her eyes on the road. Maybe, or maybe you're just too close to it. Sometimes, when something is too painful or too shocking, the mind tries to protect us. It hides things. Liam thought about her words, feeling a strange mix of fear and curiosity. Was his mind hiding something from him? Did he know more than he could remember? After a few minutes, they pulled up to a small, simple apartment building. Sarah parked the car, and they both got out, walking up a flight of stairs. She stopped at a door on the second floor, unlocked it, and let him inside. This is your apartment, she said, motioning to the small, cozy space. Liam looked around, trying to feel some kind of connection. There was a couch, a table with papers scattered on it, and a small kitchen in the corner. On the wall, he noticed a few photographs, some of him with people he didn't recognize. One photo was of him and Sarah, both smiling, looking close. Do you live alone? He asked, feeling a bit of sadness in his chest as he looked at the empty room. Yes, Sarah replied gently. You always said you liked the quiet. It helped you think, especially when you were working on a difficult case. Liam nodded, though he still felt like he didn't belong here. He moved toward the table, glancing at the papers lying there. His eyes caught sight of a file marked case number 1357. His fingers trembled as he picked it up, opening it carefully. Inside, there were photos, reports, and notes, all details of a murder case. As he looked at the photos, a wave of nausea washed over him. The pictures showed a young woman lying in an alley, her face pale, her eyes empty. There was blood on the ground, and a broken necklace lying next to her. Liam's heart pounded, and a sudden, sharp pain shot through his head. He closed his eyes, gripping the edge of the table to steady himself. The flashes came back. Images of the alley, the dark figure, the scream. His own voice echoed in his head, filled with urgency, like he was shouting at someone. Liam? Sarah's voice was soft, and her hand rested gently on his shoulder. "Are you okay?" He opened his eyes, breathing heavily. I I think I remember something. It's like I was there." Sarah's eyes widened slightly. "There? You mean at the scene?" Liam nodded slowly. "But it's all broken. I see bits and pieces, but nothing clear. It's like looking through a fog." She watched him carefully, her expression a mix of worry and hope. "Maybe we should take this slow," she suggested. "If your memory is coming back, pushing too hard might be dangerous." He looked at her, feeling a wave of frustration. "But I need to know, Sarah. I feel like there's something I should remember. Something important. And it's slipping away." Sarah sighed, understanding his struggle. "All right. How about this? I'll stay with you tonight. If anything else comes back, I'll be here." Liam felt a sense of relief, grateful not to be alone in this strange, empty place. "Thank you," he said quietly. They spent the rest of the evening talking, though most of it was one-sided. Sarah told him stories about their work, about cases they had solved together. She told him about the long hours, the late-night stakeouts, and the moments of victory when they finally cracked a case. Liam listened, hoping the stories would trigger some memories, but nothing felt familiar, and each story only made him feel more like a stranger. When night fell, Sarah set up a blanket and pillow on the couch for herself. Liam lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with questions. He could still see the image of the young woman, her lifeless eyes staring back at him. He didn't know her name, but he felt a strange connection to her, a sense of guilt he couldn't explain. As he lay there, his eyes began to close, and sleep finally took him. Dreams of shadows. In his dream, he was back in the alley. The air was cold, and a thick fog surrounded him. He could barely see, but he felt a presence nearby. He looked around, his heart pounding, feeling as if someone was watching him. A shadow moved in the corner of his vision, and he turned, trying to see who it was, but the figure was just a blur, slipping in and out of sight. He took a step forward, his hand reaching out, but the shadow vanished, leaving him alone in the darkness. Then he heard it, a faint whisper, a voice calling his name. It was soft, almost gentle, yet it sent a chill down his spine. He tried to speak, to ask who was there, but no sound came out. His voice was gone, lost in the silence. Suddenly, he saw her, the young woman from the photos. She was standing just a few feet away, her face pale, her eyes filled with sadness. She looked at him, her gaze piercing, as if she was begging him to remember. "Liam," she whispered, her voice barely audible. You promised you would help me." He reached out to her, but she began to fade, dissolving into the fog. Panic filled him, and he tried to hold on, to pull her back, but she was gone, leaving him alone in the cold, empty alley. Liam woke with a start, his heart racing, his body covered in sweat. He sat up, gasping for air, trying to shake off the dream. But the young woman's face stayed with him, her sad, haunting eyes staring back at him. Sarah stirred on the couch, rubbing her eyes as she looked over at him. "Liam, are you okay?" He swallowed, trying to calm his breathing. I had a dream. About her." Sarah sat up, her face serious. "The victim?" Liam nodded, his voice shaky. "She was there in the alley. She wanted me to remember something." Sarah placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Maybe your memory is starting to come back. Dreams can sometimes bring things to the surface." Liam stared at the wall, his mind racing with questions. Who was she? Why did she feel so familiar? He didn't know the answers, but one thing was clear. The memories were starting to return, piece by piece, like puzzle pieces slowly falling into place. And somewhere in those memories lay the truth about the murder, the woman, and perhaps himself. But the shadows were growing darker, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was waiting for him on the other side. Part 3. Lost Clues. The next morning, Liam felt both tired and restless. The dream had left him uneasy, and he couldn't stop thinking about the woman's face. The feeling that he knew her, that he was somehow connected to her, was growing stronger. Sarah had already made coffee, and as he sipped it slowly, she watched him closely, as if she could see his thoughts. Finally, she spoke up. "Do you want to go back to the crime scene?" she asked softly. "Maybe being there will help you remember more." Liam nodded. "Yes, I think I need to see it again. I keep seeing flashes of that alley, but they don't make sense. Maybe if I'm there, it will become clearer." They finished their coffee in silence, both of them preparing for what might come next. The drive to the alley was quiet too, with only the soft hum of the car filling the air. Liam tried to focus, hoping that seeing the place would unlock his memory. When they arrived, the alley was empty, cold, and silent. The sun was hidden behind clouds, casting a gray light over everything. Liam felt a chill as he stepped out of the car, looking around slowly, trying to find something that felt familiar. He moved down the narrow path, his eyes scanning every detail. The walls covered in graffiti, the broken glass on the ground, and the dark corners that seemed to hold secrets. "This is where she was found?" Liam asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah nodded, pointing to a spot near the wall. "Right there. The police found her lying here, her necklace broken beside her. They said it looked like there had been a struggle." Liam closed his eyes, trying to bring back the images from his dream. He could almost hear the echoes of footsteps, feel the tension in the air, and sense the fear that must have filled this place. Then a memory flashed before him. A quick, sharp image of himself standing in the alley, his hand reaching out, but he couldn't see who he was reaching for, and the image faded just as quickly as it came. Did I know her?" he asked, feeling a strange mix of fear and sadness. Sarah looked at him, unsure. "You never mentioned knowing her. You were just very focused on the case." It felt personal for you, but you didn't say why. Liam took a deep breath, looking down at the ground. He knelt, touching the cold pavement, trying to imagine the last moments of the young woman's life, the sadness in her eyes, the plea he'd felt in his dream. It was as if she was still reaching out to him, needing him to remember. Liam, Sarah's voice was gentle, pulling him back. Don't push yourself too hard. Sometimes, memories come back when you least expect it. Forcing them might only make things harder. But Liam couldn't let go. He felt as if he was on the edge of something important, a truth hidden just beyond his reach. Can you tell me more about the investigation? He asked. Anything that might help. Sarah nodded, leading him back to the car. Once they were seated, she began to explain. The police found her wallet, but there wasn't much in it. No ID, just a few coins and a piece of paper with some numbers on it. They think the numbers might be part of a phone number, but it was too smudged to be sure. Did we check the numbers against anyone? Liam asked, trying to remember if he'd looked into it. Yes, Sarah replied. You checked phone records, but there was no match. You also spoke to people nearby, but no one seemed to know her. It was as if she'd come out of nowhere. Liam's heart sank. The more he heard, the more he realized how mysterious this case was. He thought hard, trying to find a clue, anything that might help. Did she have any personal items on her? He asked. Just the necklace. It was a simple chain with a small charm, a silver star. You kept it with you, hoping it would lead somewhere. But so far, nothing. Liam felt a pang of sadness as he thought about the necklace. Somehow it felt important. He wished he could hold it now, see if it stirred any memories. As they sat there, Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her face lighting up with surprise. It's the detective who took over your case after your memory loss, she said. He wants to meet with us. He says he found something. Liam's heart leaped. This was their first lead in days. Maybe, finally, he would get some answers. They drove to the police station, hope and anxiety swirling inside Liam. When they arrived, the detective greeted them and led them into a small office. He looked at Liam with a mix of respect and concern, clearly aware of Liam's recent struggles. Liam, he said, I've been following up on some details of the case, and something new came up. We found a witness. He didn't see the crime, but he saw someone near the alley the night it happened. Liam leaned forward, every nerve on edge. Who did he see? The detective pulled out a sketch. It was a drawing of a man, his features sharp and serious. Something about the face seemed oddly familiar, but Liam couldn't place it. He said the man looked nervous, like he was hiding something. The detective explained. The witness didn't get a good look, but he remembers seeing this man more than once around the area. Liam studied the sketch, a strange feeling creeping over him. The man in the drawing felt close, like someone he should know. But no memory came. Do you think he's the killer? Liam asked quietly. We don't know yet, the detective replied. But he could be connected. We're checking records, trying to find out who he is. Liam nodded, though the feeling of confusion and frustration grew stronger. The answers seemed so close, but he was still stuck in the dark, unable to grasp the full picture. As they left the station, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that he'd seen the man in the sketch before. His face haunted Liam, stirring memories that refused to come fully into focus. Back at his apartment, Liam sat quietly, going over everything in his mind. He looked at the file again, staring at the young woman's face, the broken necklace, the cold alley where she'd been found. Why did it all feel so close, yet so out of reach? As he sat there, exhaustion finally took over, and he fell asleep on the couch. And once again, the dreams came. In his dream, he was back in the alley. It was dark, cold, and filled with shadows. He could hear faint whispers around him, voices calling his name, pleading with him. He looked around, searching for the source of the voices, but he saw only darkness. Then he felt a presence behind him. He turned, and there she was, the young woman, her eyes filled with sorrow. She reached out to him, her lips moving as if she was trying to speak, but no sound came. "Help me," he thought he heard her say, though her voice was faint, almost lost in the wind. He reached out, trying to hold on to her, but she faded into the shadows, leaving him alone. And then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw someone else. The man from the sketch, the nervous face, the serious expression. The man was watching him, his eyes filled with something dark and secret. Liam tried to move, to go after him, but his legs wouldn't work. He was trapped, stuck in the darkness as the man's face grew closer, filling his vision. Suddenly, he woke up, gasping for breath, his heart pounding. The dream had felt so real, and the man's face was still vivid in his mind. Liam sat up, shaken but determined. He knew now that the man in the sketch held the key. Somehow he was connected to this mystery, to the young woman's death. And Liam wouldn't rest until he found the truth. Part 4. Uncovering Secrets. The next morning, Liam woke up feeling determined. He couldn't stop thinking about the man from his dream, the face from the sketch. Somehow, this person was linked to everything. And Liam had a feeling that finding him would bring back more of his memories. Sarah sensed his determination. Over breakfast, she looked at him with a slight smile. "You seem more focused today," she said, handing him a cup of coffee. Liam nodded, taking a sip. I feel closer to the truth. But there are still so many gaps. Like, why can't I remember who she was or why I cared so much about this case?" Sarah sighed. "I've been thinking too. Maybe we've been going about this the wrong way." "What do you mean?" Liam asked. "Instead of just looking at the case," she explained, "maybe we should look at you. Your past. If this case feels personal, there must be a reason why. Maybe something in your own life will help us understand why you feel so connected to it." Liam considered this. He hadn't really thought much about his own past since his memory loss. He'd been so focused on the case and the strange flashes in his mind. "Where should we start?" he asked. "Well," Sarah said, "before you lost your memory, you kept notes and files. Maybe we can find something there." They spent the next few hours digging through Liam's old belongings. Papers, notebooks, and files filled with his handwriting, bits of information, and ideas he jotted down. It was like piecing together someone else's life, but every note brought a small hint of familiarity. Then, Sarah pulled out a notebook. It was worn, with pages marked by quick, messy handwriting. She flipped it open to the middle, where Liam had scribbled some names and places. "Look," she said, pointing to one page. "You wrote something about a Jane Doe." Liam's heart skipped a beat. Jane Doe, the name the police used for unidentified bodies. But in his handwriting, there was something else written beside it. It read, "She deserves justice, no matter what." Liam's hand trembled as he looked at the words. Why had he written that? Who was this Jane Doe to him? Suddenly, he remembered a faint image. Himself sitting in his old office, staring at the photo of a young woman with the same sad eyes. "I promise," he had said to her picture. "I'll find out who you are." The memory hit him like a wave, leaving him gasping for breath. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, her eyes full of concern. Liam nodded slowly. I think I made a promise to her. I promised to solve this case, to find out who she was." "Then we have to keep that promise," Sarah said firmly. "Let's go back to the police station. Maybe they have new information." At the station, the detective greeted them, his expression serious. "Liam, I've been digging into the background of the case, just like you asked. There's something strange here." He led them to a back room filled with files. "We reviewed all the cases you worked on in the past. And guess what? This Jane Doe case is not in the official records. There's no report, no documentation. It's like it never happened." Liam frowned. "What do you mean? I remember working on it. I remember looking into her background." "That's the thing," the detective said. "It looks like someone went out of their way to erase this case from the system. We only found one small note about it, hidden in an unrelated file. But I did manage to get one piece of evidence, something that was left behind." He pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside was the silver necklace with the star charm, the same one Sarah had mentioned before. Liam stared at it, feeling a deep sense of sadness and guilt. He reached out, touching the bag, feeling an odd connection to the charm. "Do you remember anything?" Sarah asked gently. "I don't know. It feels familiar, like I've seen it so many times before." He closed his eyes, letting his mind drift, trying to pull up any memory he could. Suddenly, he saw himself back in that alley. The young woman lying on the ground, her necklace broken beside her. He could hear her last words, faint but clear in his mind. "Help me. Please." The memory was hazy, but Liam could feel the weight of it, the sadness and guilt pressing down on him. He opened his eyes, looking at Sarah and the detective. I was there, he whispered. I don't know why, but I was there when she died. I think she was reaching out to me. The detective's face grew grim. Then you're closer to the truth than we thought. We need to find out who she was. Maybe someone erased this case because they didn't want her identity to be known. Liam nodded. He knew he was getting closer, but there were still so many unanswered questions. Who was she? Why had someone gone to such lengths to erase her existence? Let's check the city records, the detective suggested. If there's no police file, maybe there's something in the public records. A missing person report, perhaps. They spent hours combing through files, looking at pictures and reports. Finally, they found a match. The young woman had been reported missing a few months before, under the name Emily Hart. Her family had searched for her, but no one had seen or heard from her since. Liam felt a deep pang of sadness. Emily, he murmured. Her name was Emily. Sarah put a comforting hand on his shoulder. At least now we know who she was. That's a start. But the detective still looked concerned. There's one more thing, he said. We checked the witness reports again, and someone claimed to have seen a man watching Emily in the days before she disappeared. The witness described him as looking anxious, nervous. A man with a face similar to the sketch. Liam's mind raced. The man from his dreams, the one haunting his memories. Could it be that he'd known Emily? That he'd followed her, watched over her, or maybe even— No, he couldn't finish the thought. He couldn't be the one responsible. Could he? But as he looked at the necklace and the report, doubt filled his mind. The memories he'd been fighting to recall seemed darker now, and the question hung over him like a shadow. Had he been protecting Emily, or had he been the reason she was in danger? They left the station with more questions than answers. Liam's mind was full of confusion and worry. He wanted to remember more, but he was also scared of what the truth might be. He didn't want to believe that he'd been involved in something so terrible. As they walked back to the car, Sarah looked at him, her face full of sympathy. Liam, whatever you remember, whatever the truth is, I'm here for you, she said gently. We'll face it together. Liam nodded, grateful for her support, but deep down, he knew he had to face this alone. He had to find out what had really happened to Emily, and he had to come to terms with whatever role he had played. That night, as he lay in bed, he held the necklace in his hand, letting its cool weight comfort him. He closed his eyes, focusing on the charm, letting his mind drift back into the shadows of his past. And once again, the dreams came. He saw Emily's face, her sad eyes watching him. This time, she wasn't alone. The man from the sketch stood beside her, his expression unreadable, his gaze fixed on Liam. As they watched him, Liam felt a terrible truth pressing down on him, a truth he wasn't ready to face. But he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't turn back now. He had to see this through, no matter where it led. Part 5. The Final Truth. The following morning, Liam awoke with a strange sense of calm. He knew the end of his search was near. He could feel it. Last night's dreams had been more vivid than ever. He saw Emily, the man in the shadows, and himself, all together in one place, all connected in ways he was only beginning to understand. Sarah met him for coffee. She looked at him with concern. "Are you okay?" she asked. "You seem different." "I feel different," he replied. "I think I'm finally ready to face the truth. Whatever it is, I need to know." She nodded. "Then let's go back to the station." The detective said he'd dig deeper into Emily's background. Maybe he's found something new. At the police station, the detective was waiting for them with a thick folder. His face was serious, his eyes focused. "Liam," he began, "we uncovered more about Emily Hart's life. Her story isn't simple. It seems she was involved with some dangerous people, but she wanted out." Liam took a deep breath. He didn't understand everything yet, but he felt a growing connection to Emily. "Why was I involved?" he asked. The detective looked at him. "We believe you were her protection. You were trying to help her get out. But someone didn't want that." A memory flickered in Liam's mind. Himself and Emily, meeting secretly, her voice shaky as she whispered, "I need to get away. I don't feel safe anymore." He shuddered. "I tried to protect her, but I failed. Didn't I?" The detective nodded sadly. "It seems that someone found out about your plan. They wanted her gone. And you out of the way." The pieces were slowly falling into place. Liam's job was to protect Emily, but he had failed. He had been attacked, lost his memory, and forgotten everything. And Emily had lost her life. Sarah touched his arm, grounding him. "Liam, you did your best. You tried to save her. This isn't your fault." But as they spoke, the detective pulled out one last piece of evidence. It was a letter, handwritten by Emily. He handed it to Liam with a solemn expression. Liam unfolded the letter, recognizing Emily's delicate handwriting. It was addressed to him. "Liam, if you're reading this, then something has gone terribly wrong. I wanted to thank you for everything you tried to do for me. You were the only person who cared enough to help. The only one who believed I could start a new life. No matter what happens, remember that you gave me hope. Thank you." Liam felt a tear slide down his cheek. In that moment, he felt Emily's gratitude, her fear, and her strength. She had trusted him, and he had tried to be there for her, even if he couldn't remember it. The detective placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It's clear that you cared about her deeply. Sometimes we can't control what happens, no matter how hard we try." Liam took a deep breath, the weight of guilt lifting slightly. "Thank you for finding this." He stood, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. He looked at Sarah and the detective, grateful for their support, for not giving up on him. "I think it's time for me to let go," he said softly. "Emily's memory will stay with me, but I can't keep punishing myself. She wouldn't have wanted that." Sarah smiled gently, pride in her eyes. "Then let's leave here." You have a life to live, Liam. As they walked out of the station, Liam felt the sun on his face, warming him. The shadows of his past were still there, but they felt lighter now, easier to bear. He had faced the truth and found a way to move forward. Emily's story was now part of him, a memory he would carry, but one that would no longer haunt him. He would live his life with peace, honoring her spirit by moving forward. With Sarah by his side, Liam took his first steps toward a new beginning, leaving the silent memories behind, ready to start again.